It is the early hours of April 21st, 1918. Spring has begun to thaw the shattered fields of the Western Front, and over the scarred farmland of northern France, the morning sky glows with a dull gray light. Below, the trenches run like old wounds across the land, filled with mud, smoke, and waiting men. Above, the air is cold and still, broken only by the thrum of rotary engines echoing softly across the Somme River valley. It is a Sunday, quiet for now, but the war does not pause for rest days. Allied squadrons are already airborne, conducting patrols near the front lines. German units are responding. Among them is Jagdgeschwader 1, the elite fighter wing of the Luftstreitkräfte. Leading them is a man every pilot on both sides knows by name. Rittmeister Manfred von Richthofen, 25 years old, 63 confirmed kills in the past year alone, and a reputation that stretches from Berlin to London. His Fokker WW1 triplane, painted a brilliant crimson, is already in the air, its stubby wings carving through the clouds. To those on the ground, he is a symbol of German aerial dominance. To the young pilots under his command, he is a disciplined leader, strict and exacting. To the Allies, he is simply the Red Baron, a hunter who rarely misses. The skies he patrols this morning are crowded. British Sopwith Camels from No. 209 Squadron are operating just south of the River Somme. Among them is a green Canadian pilot named Wilfred "Wop" May, flying his first combat mission, and his squadron leader, Captain Arthur Roy Brown. The airspace near Corbie is thick with patrol routes and crossed paths, and soon 2 sets of enemies will lock eyes. The stage is set for one of the most analyzed aerial engagements of the First World War. But no one involved knows that yet. For now, the triplanes and camels weave through the overcast skies, searching for targets, unaware that within the hour, the war's most feared fighter pilot will be gone. Manfred von Richthofen, known to the world as the Red Baron, was more than just a fighter pilot. He was a calculated hunter in the sky, methodical, quiet, and impossibly efficient. Before the war, he was a cavalry officer, trained to ride horses and wield sabers. But trench warfare made that world obsolete. So he looked up to the sky, and in 1915 he transferred to the Imperial German Air Service. His first missions were as an observer, manning a camera and a machine gun in the back seat of a 2-seater. But it wasn't enough. He wanted control. He wanted to fly. By 1916, he had earned his wings and was flying combat patrols over the Western Front. His first confirmed kill came in September of that year, and from there the victories came quickly. His technique was precise and deliberate. He didn't rely on instinct. He studied his targets, stalked them, waited for the right moment to strike. Richthofen did not take joy in the kill, but he understood its purpose. He flew the Albatros D2, then the D3, and eventually the Fokker DR-1 triplane, a compact, agile fighter that turned tighter than anything the Allies had. He painted it red, not for vanity, but so his enemies would see him coming and know exactly who had them in their sights. By early 1917, he was Germany's top ace. His score climbed past 20, then 40, then 60. He was awarded the Pour le Mérite, Germany's highest military honor. In January 1918, at just 25 years old, he was promoted to command Jagdgeschwader 1, a unit of elite fighter squadrons that became known as the Flying Circus because of their brightly painted aircraft and constant movement along the front. But command didn't keep him out of combat. He flew almost daily, leading patrols from the front, never from the rear. Pilots on both sides respected him. Allied newspapers ran stories about him. Civilians in London and Paris knew his name. He became a symbol, a legend, a red-painted warning in the sky. By April 1918, his victory count stood at 80. No one else came close. And yet, for all the fame, he remained reserved, even detached. He once wrote that he saw himself not as a killer, but as a soldier doing a job. He said he would prefer to bring down his enemies without bloodshed, if it were possible. But it wasn't. Not in that war, not in that sky. The morning of April 21st began like many others. Thin clouds drifted above the French countryside as the sun broke low across the mist-covered fields near the Somme. At Cappy Airfield, east of Amiens, the mechanics of Yasta 11 prepared the Crimson Fokker DRI for flight. Its 3 wings stretched rigid above the grass, the engine already ticking over with that uneven rhythm that only a rotary could produce. Manfred von Richthofen climbed into the cockpit just before 10 a.m. No ceremony, no final words, just another sortie. His squadron was already airborne, a mix of veterans and young pilots, some with just weeks of flight experience. They flew in support of German ground troops engaged near Le Hamel, chasing after reports of enemy aircraft in the area. On the other side of the lines, Sopwith camels from number. 209 Squadron of the Royal Air Force were flying patrols of their own. Among them was Lieutenant Wilfrid Wop May, a 21-year-old Canadian fresh from training. It was his first day at the front. His job was to stay high, stay back, and observe. Avoid combat unless absolutely necessary. Another Canadian, Captain Roy Brown, was also in the air. Older, more experienced, and wary. The fight began around 10:35 a.m. May spotted a German 2-seater and broke formation, diving in pursuit. It was a rookie mistake. He fell behind enemy lines, flying low and alone. Richthofen saw the move and reacted instantly. He nosed over, picked up speed, and gave chase. The Red Baron, one of the deadliest pilots of the war, was now hunting a novice who didn't yet know how close to death he was. The 2 planes raced over the scarred French landscape, barely 150 feet above the ground, weaving between trees, trenches, and shell holes. Richthofen closed the gap, calmly adjusting his angle, his speed, his range. Behind him, Roy Brown saw what was happening and dove after the red triplane, trying to save his wingman before it was too late. 3 aircraft now cut across the front, Allied and German troops below pausing to watch the chase unfolding just above their heads. It was fast, violent, and minutes from ending. The final seconds came quickly. Richthofen was still on May's tail, matching every desperate swerve and climb, slowly closing the distance. His machine guns were primed, his aim steady. Just a few more yards, and the kill would be certain. But as the trio of aircraft roared low over the ridge near Vaux-sur-Somme, everything changed. Allied ground troops in the area had taken notice. Australian machine gunners, positioned along the edge of the ridge, opened fire. At the same time, Roy Brown's Camel came in from behind, diving hard, his own guns blazing as he tried to disrupt the Baron's pursuit. What happened next has been debated for over a century. Richthofen's triplane continued forward for several seconds, then suddenly jerked. Witnesses say it wobbled in the air, dipped slightly, and then straightened out again. But something was wrong. The red Fokker was no longer climbing or turning. It was gliding, slow, level, and strangely quiet. Inside the cockpit, Richthofen was slumped forward. A single bullet had entered his right side, passed through his chest, and exited near his left shoulder. He was likely dead before the aircraft even touched the ground. The triplane floated over a small hill, losing altitude, then came down in a field near the Bray-Corbie road. The landing was almost gentle. No fire, no explosion, just a soft thud as the wheels caught the dirt and the aircraft slid to a stop. Allied soldiers rushed toward it. They expected a trap or a wounded pilot. What they found instead was the Red Baron, motionless in his seat, his engine still ticking faintly. A single bullet had ended the career of the most feared pilot in the war. At the time, credit for the kill was given to Captain Roy Brown. His combat report matched the timeline. His angle made it plausible. But those on the ground told a different story. They believed the fatal shot came from below, from a Vickers machine gun on the ridge, fired by an Australian gunner named Cedric Popkin. The autopsy supported this. The bullet had entered from the side, moving upward. Not the path of an aircraft in pursuit, but of a ground-based weapon. The truth may never be known for certain. What mattered in that moment was this: the Red Baron was gone. News of Richthofen's death spread fast. By the afternoon, word had reached both Allied and German lines. The man who had ruled the skies for nearly 2 years, who had downed 80 enemy aircraft and walked away from every dogfight, had finally fallen. But the questions began almost immediately. Who had fired the shot? Who could claim the final victory over the Red Baron? Captain Roy Brown's official report stated that he had engaged Richthofen while the German pilot was pursuing May. Brown's bullets, he believed, had struck their mark. The Royal Air Force agreed. For morale, for clarity, for paperwork, the kill was his. But soldiers on the ground saw it differently. Australian infantrymen from the 53rd Battery, camped near the Bray-Corbie road, insisted that the triplane had been hit from below. One gunner, Sergeant Cedric Popkin, was positioned on the right flank, firing a Vickers machine gun as Richthofen passed overhead. He saw the red aircraft falter. Other eyewitnesses backed him up. The trajectory of the wound added weight to their claims. Doctors who examined the body found that the bullet had entered from the right side, below the armpit, and exited through the chest, a path consistent with ground fire, not air-to-air combat. Despite this, Brown remained the officially credited victor for decades. The truth, buried under paperwork and pride, was complicated. In the end, no single name could capture what had happened. Richthofen's final moments had been chaotic, fast, and crowded with fire from every direction. What came next, however, was clear and quiet. The Allies, recognizing who they had brought down, treated the fallen pilot with full military honors. His body was recovered from the triplane and taken to a nearby field hospital. There he was washed, dressed, and placed in a simple wooden coffin. On April 22nd, British and Australian officers organized a funeral near Bertangles. A group of RAF pilots served as pallbearers. A military chaplain read a short service. A cross was placed at the grave. They buried him with the same respect they would have shown one of their own. Photographs from the day show a line of soldiers standing at attention, heads bowed, rifles lowered. The war continued, but for a few hours, even enemies paused to acknowledge the end of a legend. He was only 25 when he died, but by then Manfred von Richthofen had already become a legend. His red triplane, his quiet precision, his unmatched record, all of it etched his name into the history of aerial combat. 80 confirmed victories, more than any other pilot in the war, and countless more engagements where his presence alone had changed the tide of a fight. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was how he fought. Calculated, disciplined, never reckless. He didn't chase glory. He chased results. He trained his men to do the same. He discouraged heroics and disapproved of unnecessary risk. His tactics became doctrine. His writings on air combat, compiled in letters and notes, would later be studied by air forces around the world. After his death, pieces of his aircraft were salvaged and kept as relics. Parts of the red Fokker triplane ended up in museums in Britain, Australia, and Canada. His impact went beyond the battlefield. In Germany, he was a symbol of honor and skill during a brutal war. In Britain, even among his enemies, he was respected. Pilots who faced him spoke of him not with hatred, but with admiration. Over time, the myth grew. He was portrayed in books, films, and even comics. But behind the image was a soldier who saw the war for what it was, deadly, exhausting, and without romance. In a letter not long before his final mission, he admitted he felt tired. Tired of the killing, tired of the sky. But he flew anyway, because that was his duty. Today, more than a century later, his name still stands as one of the most recognized in military aviation, the Red Baron. Not just a nickname, but a mark of precision, fear, and respect. He didn't seek fame, but history gave it to him anyway.